Everything in this podcast is alleged and my own opinion and from my own perspective. Please do your own research and come up with your own opinions.
We have new details tonight on the mysterious deaths of a mother and her 2 young daughters in the upscale subdivision of Anaqua Springs.
It was supposed to be just another quiet night in one of the wealthiest corners of Bexar County. Gated streets, manicured lawns, a place where porch lights are soft, and danger feels like something that only happens somewhere else. But inside one home in Anaqua Springs Ranch, something unimaginable happened. The official story said one thing. The evidence whispers another.
He said he left and stayed somewhere else. The next morning, Wheeler told deputies he found the 3 shot to death in the house. When he went back to check on them, they were on the 2nd floor of the home.
Was that while we did know that there was a disconnected call, a dropped call from that phone number, we don't know where that number is calling from. So all that we know is that we have a dropped call from a cell phone number.
According to the sheriff, 911 calls need at least a certain amount of time, which he would not disclose, so the coordinates can be picked up for the location.
But in the years since that night, the words suicide and homicide have been tangled together in headlines.
Now the sheriff refuses to sign the final report. But why?
And a sheriff whose every press conference and camera moment has drawn scrutiny from locals and from out-of-town observers alike.
Geofencing warrant because they were still waiting on the, quote, completed file from the Bexar County Sheriff's Office. So what the hell? Sounds like they're willing to entertain it or push it through, but yet they're waiting on the Sheriff's Office, and for some reason Sheriff Salazar is not completing that paperwork to take a look at geofencing, because that seems like a really great way
why wouldn't he
to figure out.
In this episode, we're going to pull back the gates of Anaqua Springs and walk through the contradictions. The 911 calls that connected for just a moment, the man who left the house hours before the bodies were found, and the families who are still searching for the truth. Because behind the headlines, behind the arguments online, is something deeper, a silence that still hangs over Bexar County. And tonight, we're breaking that silence.
We are unmuted.
Hey everyone, welcome back to Angeliz Unmuted. Before we get into today's video, I just wanted to pop in and update you guys on where I've been, what's going on. So the past couple of weeks, I've been having some health issues. It's the best way I can put it. And it was also my oldest 4th birthday. So I was a little bit busy. And also we have a schedule change. Episodes will now be going out on all platforms on Sundays at 8 p.m. Central Standard Time. So I will see you all then. Before we talk about what happened that night, we have to talk about the woman who should still be here. The mother who should still be raising her children. The friend whose smile once lit up rooms. Nichole's life mattered. Her daughters' lives mattered. And the questions surrounding their deaths still matter. Nichole's story begins far from the tragedy that would one day define it, in California, where she was born on May 27, 1981. To Rick Carl and McCheryl Denise Olsen. She grew up with the kind of smile people remembered, the kind that spoke volumes, as her loved ones put it. When her family moved to Texas, she settled into the Northeast Independent School District and attended James Madison High School in San Antonio, a teenager with dreams, friends, and a bright future that no one could have imagined would end so painfully. After high school, Nichole built a life centered around hard work, creativity, and talent. She earned her cosmetology license and worked in some of San Antonio's most well-liked salons, the kinds of places where people didn't just get their hair done, they shared stories, secrets, and pieces of their lives. Nichol had a gift for making people feel seen and beautiful inside and out. And she didn't stop there. Nichol launched her own hair and jewelry business, a reflection of her entrepreneurial spirit and restless drive. She was someone who created opportunities, someone who pushed forward, someone who wanted more for her family. But the role she cherished most, the one written in every photo, every memory, every story shared by those who loved her, was being a mother. She had 3 children, Skylar, her son, Alexa and London, her daughters. Her life revolved around them. Holidays were loud and full of laughter, food, family, games, and the kind of joy that comes from being surrounded by the people who matter most. But on January 10th, 2019, everything changed. Nichol, along with her daughters, Alexa and London, were found dead. A moment that shattered a family, a moment that pierced the entire community.
Was joined together to say goodbye to a friend.
Alexa was the most beautiful cheerleader.
A moment that 6 years later remains tangled in contradictions, unanswered questions, and an investigation that many believe fell short.
I don't think we've ever been able to just call him up and talk to him. It's always been we've had to go through the media and create up a storm in order to get his attention.
Sumner wrote a letter to Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton asking the Texas Rangers to investigate this case and also Sheriff Salazar's handling of it.
And I think that it would be very honorable of him to step up and say, hey, yes, we screwed up, but I just don't think he's the kind of person to do that. I think he's just going to try to keep everything covered up and try to keep making himself look good.
And this is why we're here today. Because Nichol's story is more than a case file, more than an argument over ruling or classification, more than the headlines that came and went. It's now the morning of January 10th, 2019. The last night of Nichol's life is over. The unanswered calls have stopped. The house is still. And the next series of events will set the stage for years of controversy. Nichol's boyfriend, Charles Wheeler, returns to the Anaqua Springs ranch home, the same home where he admitted leaving after an argument the night before. Soon after entering, he places a call to 911. He reports finding Nichol and the girls unresponsive. But when deputies arrive, something immediately stands out. According to the case timeline, Nichol wasn't just unresponsive, she was cold and rigid to the touch. Alexa and London were also found upstairs, already in advanced post-mortem condition. That detail alone raised quiet questions among investigators and the community. How long had they been gone? And what exactly happened during these hours between the late-night phone calls and the discovery the next morning? Deputies document what they're seeing: blood smeared on the walls and floors, a pool of blood near a bathroom doorway, all 3 victims upstairs, all shot. The home, once a place meant to shelter a family, now a crime scene with layers of unanswered questions. Immediately, detectives began separating timelines, trying to piece together, when did Nichol make her last call? How long after Wheeler left did the shots occur? Who was in the home? Why did those 911 calls fail to connect? And why did a mother of 3, whose friends say was not suicidal, make attempts for help minutes before her death?
Several sources close to the investigation tell Fox San Antonio that Nichol Olsen's phone records show the mother made 5 calls just after 11 o'clock. One to Wheeler's mother at 11:09, which we're told was not answered. Then 4 separate calls to 911. First call was at 11:10, followed by 2 calls at 11:11, and a final one at 11:12. 3 did not connect, but show up on Olsen's phone record.
911, what is your emergency?
Only 1 of those connected to the 911 system.
One of those calls actually went through and registered with you guys. Why didn't anyone respond to her?
Well, and that was one of the questions that I had.
This is the moment when the first divide in the story forms. On one side, investigators who early on suggested the possibility of a murder-suicide. On the other, Nichole's family, her friends, and later outside observers, all insisting that Nichol would never harm her daughters, ever. And while all of that was happening, a son just lost his mother and 2 little sisters. A grandmother lost 3 generations in one morning. A community was left stunned. And an investigation was only beginning, one that 4 years later would still not produce a definitive explanation. This was the scene deputies walked into. This was the starting point: chaos, tragedy, and 3 lives handled with restraint by investigators, yet overshadowed by silence, contradictions, and classification the community would come to fiercely challenge. In the hours after Nichol and her daughters were found, the Bexar County Sheriff's Office began shaping the narrative the public would hear. But from the very beginning, the narrative wavered. Sheriff Salazar takes the podium. He describes the scene as complex, sensitive, something requiring caution. But even in those first briefings, a word hangs in the air. 1 investigators haven't confirmed, 1 medical examiners haven't finalized, 1 the family insists is impossible: murder-suicide. And that's where the contradictions begin. At first, Salazar publicly stated the investigation was open, active, and ongoing. He urged patience. He said they were considering all possibilities. But within days, the language shifted. Suddenly, statements hinted that investigators were leaning toward a murder-suicide, despite incomplete forensic analysis, no public release of ballistic details, no confirmed timeline of the shots, and Nichole's family adamantly rejecting the notion that she would never harm her daughters. And yet the tone persisted, not officially, not stamped on paper, but echoed in interviews, press answers, and strategic pauses. In February 2019, the Bexar County Medical Examiner releases their final conclusion: Alexa and London, homicides; Nichol, suicide. The ruling hits the community like a brick. A triple death in an upscale neighborhood reduced to a murder-suicide with no criminal charges, no suspect, no trial, and no answers. And from that day forward, the entire trajectory of this case becomes defined by a single question: did Nichol Olsen really kill her daughters and then herself? Or is this a grave misclassification still waiting to be corrected? Sheriff Salazar continues to say the same thing. The case is open, yet he won't close it. But he won't reclassify it, yet he insists it's not solved. For families seeking justice, that kind of stance is not neutral. It's paralyzing. It's a contradiction that stops progress, and it leaves the community and Nichole's surviving loved ones stuck in a cycle of grief, questions, and political posturing. This is the contradiction the public sees: a mother and 2 daughters dead, a ruling that doesn't fit the evidence we can see, a sheriff who says he's not ready to call her a murderer, but also hasn't taken any steps to prove otherwise, a case that remains open but unmoving. It's rare for a community to push back this hard on a ruling. It's even rarer for the pushback to grow over time instead of fade. But in Nichol Olsen's case, the backlash only intensified. Neighbors, friends, co-workers, total strangers, parents who understand a mother's bond, victims' advocates, true crime researchers, local activists, they all echoed the same sentiment: Nichol didn't do this. And this wasn't blind loyalty or emotion. It was people pointing to the inconsistencies, the unanswered 911 calls, the argument, the physical evidence, the timeline, the behavior of those around her. These community members weren't trying to rewrite facts. They were demanding that all of the facts be seen. People remembered Nichol as a mother who adored her children. She was active in their lives. She decorated for holidays. She cooked, she played games, she took photos, she built an entire world around them. And so when the ruling labeled her as the one that took their lives, something in this community snapped. To them, the ruling wasn't just incorrect, it was offensive, wrong, lazy, simplistic, a shortcut for a case that deserved depth, science, and sensitivity. People who never met Nichol began showing up, advocating, sharing her story online, writing posts, filming videos, attending vigils, demanding transparency.
Yeah, a lot more questions than answers, unfortunately.
Yeah.
But I think the more you dig into it, the more this theory sort of starts to make sense. And I think a lot of people will lean one way, but then there's just a serious lack of information, because it seems like this case would be somewhat clear-cut if the evidence was investigated properly and if the police were being transparent about the crime scene, and it doesn't seem like that's happened at all. And rightfully so, the family of the victims here are extremely upset with law enforcement, so much so that they've reached out to the Attorney General. They're trying to get the case moved over to the Texas Rangers because this takes place in Bexar County. Now, the trust has been broken. And Mr. Sheriff Salazar, who will be featured a lot in this episode, just makes your skin crawl, honestly. He's just such a car salesman, like law enforcement official. It seems like he says a lot of things, and a lot of things that he probably shouldn't say, and then he doesn't back up anything with actions.
Yeah.
For 6 years, the sheriff's office has maintained the same tune. This case is open, but you don't have to be a detective to see that open doesn't mean active. Every year, community questions get louder. Why hasn't the case been reassigned? Why haven't independent forensic experts been brought in? Why hasn't the evidence been fully released? Why does the sheriff speak in circles? Open but solved, not solved but concluded, concluded but undecided. People began noticing that the clarity wasn't coming from the sheriff, it was coming from the public. Podcasters, YouTubers, analysts, and small investigative pages began breaking down the case themselves, not out of obsession, but out of sheer frustration that officials weren't doing it. Forums dissected timelines, mothers' groups shared Nichol's story, advocates posted inconsistencies in the autopsy reports. Locals wrote letters and emails asking for updates. And each year, around the anniversary of the deaths, the pressure returns, louder than the year before. This case became more than a local tragedy. It became a symbol of what happens when a community believes its officials got it wrong and refuses to stay quiet. When investigators label a case a murder-suicide, the first question any reasonable person asks is simple: why? What was the motive? And in the case of Nichol Olsen and her daughters, that question has never, not once, been answered. For Nichol to be responsible, investigators would need to present a clear reason, a trigger, a moment of psychological collapse, a documented history, a pattern, a note, a message, a warning, something. But none of that exists. No documented mental health crisis, no violent past, no threats toward her children, no testimony from friends or family describing extreme behavior. No financial ruin, no custody battle meltdown, no medical condition known to cause psychosis, no text hinting at despair or violent intent. Instead, the public was told, "We believe she did it," and expected to accept that as motive. Yes, Nichol and her boyfriend argued the night before. Yes, he left the home because of it. Yes, the timing is very suspicious. But there's the uncomfortable truth the community keeps repeating. A relationship argument is not a motive for a mother to kill her children. Not by itself. Not without history, not without escalation, not without context. And all available evidence suggests Nichole's frustration, if anything, was directed at the adults in her life, not her girls. Her calls that night weren't angry outbursts. They were attempts for help. An argument is not a motive, and no investigator has ever stood before the public and explained why it should be. There was quiet speculation early on that Nichol might have snapped emotionally, but that theory collapses under scrutiny. Nichol had plans for the next day. She was running a business. She was raising 3 kids. She was talking to friends. She had appointments set, clients booked, goals she was actively working towards. None of that aligns with murder-suicide behavior. None of it. You can't claim motive based on a theory you never proved, and yet nothing beyond that theory was ever offered. For the murder-suicide theory to hold, investigators would have to explain why Nichol, a mother described as protective, present, and deeply attached to her girls, would harm the 2 people she loved the most. They never explained it, not once. Instead, the ruling stood on paperwork, not on motive, not on psychology, not on testimony, not on the evidence families usually see in cases like this. Because the truth is, and the sheriff will never say this out loud, there is no known motive for Nichol to kill her daughters. None, in my opinion. Here's the other side of the motive discussion, the one many people believe investigators didn't pursue thoroughly enough. If Nichol didn't do this, then someone else did, and that someone would have needed motive, opportunity, access, a reason to stage a scene, a reason to manipulate the narrative, a reason to walk away and let a mother take the blame. Those possibilities were never fully explored publicly, and without transparent explanations of why they were ruled out, the public is left questioning everything. And here's where I stand. After weeks of reading, after hours of reviewing every timeline, after seeing the evidence the public is allowed to see, and after hearing the voices of the people who knew Nichol and her daughters best, I don't see motive. I don't see logic. I don't see a mother who suddenly transformed into someone capable of taking 2 innocent lives. What I do see is an investigation that rushed toward the easiest explanation, one that didn't consider the long-term trauma this ruling would inflict on Nichol's surviving child or her family and her entire community. I see unanswered questions treated like closed doors. I see a sheriff more worried about maintaining a narrative than reopening a case. I see a system that failed a mother and her daughters, not necessarily through malice, but through complacency. And here's the part that breaks me. If Nichol didn't do this, then the person who did is still out there. Still unaccountable, still protected by the silence of this ruling. For 6 years, the community has been asking for clarity, not conspiracy, not chaos, just truth. And if the system won't ask the hard questions, then we will. For years, people have questioned why this case remains open but unchanged, why the ruling stands, yet no new evidence is presented, why the sheriff continues to defend a conclusion that so many experts, advocates, and ordinary citizens do not accept. There's a growing belief, a belief echoed by countless members of the public, that outside pressure, political influence, or even undisclosed incentives may have played a role in keeping this case exactly where it is, open, stagnant, unresolved. I'm not saying that's what happened, but I am saying this. A lot of people believe it. And I believe something happened behind the scenes that we still don't know about. Something that kept this case in limbo, something that prevented a true conclusion, something that does not add up. These are allegations, suspicions, concerns voiced by a public that has lost trust, not because they want drama, but because they want answers. And when a case stays frozen for over 6 years, when a sheriff publicly leans one way but refuses to close it, when transparency becomes opacity, people start to wonder who benefits from the silence. I'm not accusing anyone of anything. but I am acknowledging what the public has been saying for years, that something feels off, something feels guarded, and something feels protected. And until we know what that something is, we don't have the truth. And as far as my opinion on Sheriff Salazar, it remains the same. I don't believe he's fit for his position. In all honesty, he cannot even run the Bexar County Jail. He should not be handling cases like this. And in my opinion, it's very sad to admit, but I don't think this case will ever be closed. And I feel so sorry for this family and the unanswered questions that will probably remain. If you want to learn more about Nichol Olsen and her daughter's case, I highly recommend going over to the Mile Higher Podcast YouTube channel and watching the entire episode about it. There, they go into deeper conversation about what occurred that night, what happened after, and the mystery surrounding the entire case. I know I didn't go into much detail about the case itself. I just wanted to get across the failure of the system, the failure of Sheriff Salazar. I hope and pray that one day he will not be in office and somebody will take over who is willing to find out the truth about everything that has happened since Sheriff Salazar took office in 2017, including all of the inmate deaths that have happened at the Bexar County Jail, all of the cases that have been closed but maybe weren't concluded in the correct way. For example, the Andreen McDonald case that I did cover a while back. It just goes to show that there are many aspects of this job title that he's not capable of doing. I think he's a failure as a sheriff. He's a coward. He's all about the cameras. He loves the attention, but he is not capable of doing this job. And he's destroying lives, in my opinion. I'll see you next time.